didn't actually lose the Vietnam War, but like the United States would not commit to an all-out war against North Vietnam. If they had committed to an all-out war against North Vietnam, the war would have been over in the early to middle 60s.
However, the Vietnam War was one of the longest, most controversial conflicts that America has ever fought.
Some Americans were hawks, meaning they believed that communism was a threat to the United States and we should fight it wherever it existed.
Others were considered duds, those Americans who believed we shouldn't fear communism and thought it was frivolous to fight a war so far from home.
No matter which stance on the war people took, they were thrown into conflict.
Some at home protested the war.
America was very much against Vietnam. They sort of took their anger out on the soldiers. So you didn't wear your uniform in public. I went into the airplane in Germany and went into the bathroom and took my uniform off and put on my civilian clothes. Because if people in America in the early 1970s or 73 saw you in a uniform, they said ugly things to you. The men coming back from battle with wounds or without wounds sometimes were spit on and were called names. They were called really ugly names because America did not like being in the war, but they took their anger out on the men who fought the war.
Some Americans volunteered to serve.
When I was 15, there was a battle in Vietnam. It was the first one. It was at Ai Drang Valley, and hundreds of men were killed. And it was the first, one of the first major battles in Vietnam fought by the American soldiers. And for the first time ever in history, American battles were videotaped by people who were not controlled by the government, free agent photographers. And so every night on the nightly news, we saw battles with dead and wounded Americans. I didn't really understand the politics, like I didn't understand the difference between what Chiang Kai-shek wanted or Ho Chi Minh wanted or Lyndon Johnson wanted. All I knew was that there were young American men dying. And if I became a nurse, I could join the Army and I could go and help these dying men.
Others were drafted.
I was picked through the lottery system. At that time, they had a number system. If your number was picked, you went. It wasn't actually a draft. It was a system. It was they came up with so that everybody would be opportunity to go.
Well, at the time I had my draft notice, but the only thing they were taking in at that time, the Vietnam War was going wide open, was infantry, so I enlisted to give them 1 more year to get into the Signal Corps.
Growing up with the Vietnam War, in my den on TV every night and seeing those soldiers. My other sisters, they sort of became more, I don't know, more politically involved. We don't like the war, we're going to protest against the war. I didn't go that route. I went the route of what can I do to help the people who were fighting the war.
But those who served played their part in the war effort in various ways. Soldiers were extensively trained based upon the roles in service.
They actually was mean because they knew what we was going to face. They wanted us to understand the consequences of the situation we were going to be involved in. When I went to Vietnam, I was assigned to F Troop 17th Cavalry. And it was a 196th Brigade. And actually the 17th Cavalry at that time was attached to the 23rd Infantry. And it was all combined together, and they called it the Marical Division. So that's basically, I was in the Marical Division.
For people who are drafted or join as just soldiers as privates. They do a lot of different things than what we did. We were already finished college as part of either a nurse or a doctor or a pharmacist. And so they taught us how to be nurses, doctors, or pharmacists, or dentists in the Army. So yes, it involved some marching, but it involved a whole lot more classroom work and how to wear a uniform, how to salute, and also how to be a combat nurse, because at that time, Vietnam was going on.
To connect the frontline soldiers to command bases, Mr. Vickery linked communication systems.
We worked on all the equipment in the office during the time I worked there, and when I came out of service, I went to work for AT&T and worked for 39 years.
So explain the telephone system in Vietnam. I mean,
It was just like the telephones here. You had regular dial telephones. We had the equipment, the office there that controlled all of it on that base. We also had a radio tower there that kept communication from there back to the United States.
Another way to serve included fighting on the front lines. Mr. Banks, as a tank commander and gunner, experienced war firsthand.
We had a tank to break down and they left me behind. And all the personnel carriers with 400 Army or South Vietnamese soldiers went ahead of me, and they got hit. And actually all 400 of the South Vietnamese soldiers disappeared. Anyway, they was getting hit from a little hill next to the sea. So they radioed me for me to bring my tank up there. I was the tank commander on it at that time. I wasn't actually the gunner on it at that time. I was the tank commander. My gunner got in there and he was going to fire the thing, and he fired 2 high explosive rounds over the hill into the South China Sea next to 2 of our ships. I almost blew up 2 of our ships. So the captain come on the radio and told me to get him out of there. So I got in there and fired him. And I fired what they call a canister round. I fired 3 canister rounds. That's a canister round is like a large shotgun shell. And I fired 3 canister rounds, and that was all there was to it. We actually worked in platoons, which we had 3 tanks and 10 personnel carriers. And we had all 3 Sheridan tanks out there that day. And the enemy was hitting that helicopter. They was coming in on them, and they called for us to drop rounds around it to keep them from attacking the helicopter before another one could come in and pick them up. Well, they couldn't get nobody to do it. They was all scared that they would hit our men. So they got me to do it. They gave me the coordinates and I dropped them all the way around them. And another helicopter came in and picked them up.
Although never sent to Vietnam, Miss Haley's nursed injured soldiers in Germany.
When I was in Germany, we had an emergency room. I was the charge nurse of emergency room for a while, but we also had a trauma intensive care where people with severe head and chest injuries were admitted directly into that unit, bypassing the emergency room.
During Vietnam, 60,000 Americans gave their lives, and more than 300,000 were wounded.
One patient came in. He had been backed into by 2 Jeeps. He was standing, 2 Jeeps backed into him at the same time. And we had to stabilize him, get him literally so that he was living again, and then get him shipped to Walter Reed, where he could stay longer. We also had a little burn unit on the unit where I worked, and we had some soldiers that were pretty seriously burned. They would ship them into our hospital, to our unit. We would put them in our burn unit and stabilize them until they were stable enough to be shipped overseas or back to America, to the burn unit that's in Texas, that's at Fort Sam Houston. One patient I had was a very young man. Most of the patients I had were young men. And he was covered in burns on almost 80% of his body. If you're burned that much, you're probably going to die. So a lot of the patients that we knew, like the Jeep accident victim, we knew he would probably die. But we tried to make him comfortable, and we tried to cheer him up and take care of him so that he didn't have a lot of pain.
But we had a guy that played the guitar and sang. So that's basically what we done. We passed time listening to him sing. Unfortunately, we lost him. He was coming in from the field. And they had been to the trash dump a deuce and a half, and one of them little Vietnamese put a hand grenade in the gas tank with rubber bands around it. They drove it in and parked it behind the barracks next to two more deuce and a half, and it blowed up, blowed them trucks up, the gas tanks, ammunition dump, and the whole line of barracks that we would have been in if we had been in there.
Soldiers typically served a one-year tour in Vietnam. After this year, the government would offer incentives for their continued service.
They wanted to send me back. They offered me when I came home, I stayed over a year and one day. And they offered me $10,000 and another rank to re-up in the Army. And I asked them if they was gonna send me back to Vietnam, and they said yes. I said, well, I'm going to the house.
No matter how soldiers served, they were each deeply affected by their experiences in this war.
I actually do I have nightmares, I have flashbacks. I've been at work and heard helicopters coming in. It's something you don't forget about.
I think it made me grow a lot. I learned a lot, and I learned a lot about how to help people. I learned what other people go through and about their experiences. And I think the more opportunities that you have in your life where you can meet people, that you can have experiences that you wouldn't otherwise have, then the more you grow as a person.
Regardless of America's feelings toward the Vietnam War, there are many lessons learned. Foremost is that our military and their families need to be supported and honored no matter what.
There's a difference between war and the warrior, the person who fights the war. The person who fights the war has a lot of different reasons for going. Maybe they want to go, maybe they think of it as honor, glory, maybe they have to go, they're told to go. But the reasons people go to war are as varied as the reasons that they have war. I do know this, that the first casualty of war is the truth. For all the reasons people go into battle, there's usually another way of solving that crisis if people can just come together and talk about it.
You don't sleep good, you have nightmares, you have flashbacks. Fall out of bed. You know, it don't never leave you. It's something that you have to deal with the rest of your life.
Sometimes if you go into the military and learn the discipline that you didn't have at home, it helps you to deal with life.
Some life lessons I've learned would be to take advantage of every opportunity that comes your way, because you never know what you're going to learn, what's going to be around the other corner, who you may help. There's always something to learn.
you.